and I'll be your host for the next hour. Well, folks, something that I'd like to put out there right now, a truth that I would really like people to consider and to factor in with whatever it is that they're researching, is that everything we think we know, everything that's been taught to us by this system, the science we've been presented with, the education we've been given, the history we've been given, and quite literally everything we've been told by this system is a lie. All of it. And the depths of this lie is quite literally so profound and so all-pervasive that it's almost impossible for most people to even see, because it is quite literally so big that it covers virtually every single aspect of our lives. Virtually everything we've been told about everything is backwards. And I'm going to cover some topics on the show today that will probably seem very esoteric and right out of left field for people, but it's just stuff that needs to be addressed. It's just stuff that I want to talk about. It's important at the beginning of the discussion to lay the groundwork that is needed to even begin thinking about these things, and that groundwork is the clear understanding that everything we've been told is a lie. All of it. Our history, who we are, where we come from, our religions, our food, our medicine, what this world is, quite literally everything is a lie. And that's why it's so difficult to ever really discover the truth and to wake up the people around us, because all of the information that we're even researching, most of it, has been falsified. That is why people are constantly locked into different belief systems, why they continue to argue with each other, and why they continue to perpetuate their divide and conquer programming. Because in everything that they're looking at and all the information that they've got, they never even factor in the reality that in any investigation into the past, which is invariably where we look to find out what happened and what brought us to this point, most of the information that we glean from old books about historical figures has been doctored, rearranged, and rewritten, and in some cases it's actually even doubtful that many of these people even actually existed. In many cases, works were attributed to people who didn't do those works. In many cases, discoveries were most likely attributed to people who never made those discoveries. Many events were simply fabricated, and many people simply did not do what we were told they did. And as I said, in the case of many of them, it's doubtful that they ever even existed. Or if they did exist, it very often was not when we were told they existed, and very often the information they presented was doctored to fit the current version of reality. Though very often, no doubt, there were little gems left in there just to keep the people guessing and just to keep the people fighting and arguing and squabbling and looking for the deeper meaning without ever really stepping back and looking at reality as a whole. The thing is, people really do need to understand clearly that this is our starting point. This is what we've got to work with. The fact that everything we've been told is a lie, and we cannot rely on any of the information that we get from any books anywhere. Certainly not any books that have been put on the scene since the invention of the printing press anyway. Perhaps we can find some truth in old books such as the Vedas, perhaps the Nag Hammadi library, if there was a real interpretation of that actually existed, which there doesn't appear to be at the moment. Perhaps there are ancient scrolls that exist that do contain the truth, and perhaps the real truth is still hidden somewhere. But most certainly, apart from books such as the Vedas, we most certainly do not have access to anything even closely resembling the truth in what we are delivered from modern mainstream academic, scientific, or educational sources. And that is simply the stark reality of the matter. You know, the true reality is, and has always been, that all we can really rely on 100% is that which we go out and experience in the world for ourselves. And that's a very difficult thing for people to come to terms with. However, if one goes out and travels the world and really looks at things open-mindedly, the evidence that everything we've been told is a lie is everywhere, and it speaks for itself. And if you really look at it, one of our biggest problems, one of the things that holds us back more than anything else, comes with our blind acceptance of things. Our blind acceptance of what we're given as facts by the academic system, things that we're told, and we just take as a matter of course and just take them on as part of our everyday life without ever really investigating them. And we do this on so many levels, it's actually quite profound when you step back and look at it. Everyday things we just take as a given and don't ask questions about. And then many people tend to do this when they're researching as well. They just blindly accept what they find online. They find something that reinforces their belief system and they blindly accept it and they move on from that point. Because that's what belief systems do. As soon as you adopt a belief system, you look for stuff that reinforces that belief system and you disregard everything else. You just close yourself off to all possibilities. That's what is so dangerous about adopting belief systems halfway through this journey of life. Because it's a wondrous world, folks, and it's an amazing world, and it is nothing like what we're told it is, and we are nothing like what we are told we are. The question is, what are we? And what is this world? Where do we come from? How do we get here? And where are we going? And the answer to all of these questions is what we're all searching for at the moment, because we've been led so far from our true path. And the biggest danger in trying to find a way out of this mess is in adopting belief systems along the way and closing yourself off to the myriad of possibilities that are still out there. Now, for the last month or so, perhaps a little bit longer, I've been putting a pretty heavy focus on history. The fact that our history has changed, everything's been manipulated, and nothing is what it seems. A lot of people may think I've lost a little bit of focus off the 5G grid and the smart grid and everything that's coming out, but really it's all interrelated. Now, as I pointed out, history is what got me started on this quest to begin with. And recently there's been so much new information come out regarding history that it's kind of just pulled me back into that rabbit hole because, as I said, it's all interrelated. If we can understand how we got here, then we can see where we're going and why they're rolling this whole smart grid out so quickly. And really, when you look at it, folks, the whole progress of civilization hasn't been this gradual thing that we think it has. It's been technology that's been gradually released to us all the way along. This technology already exists. A lot of the technology we've been using for the last 50 to 100 years, I would suggest, already existed. They had it before the Industrial Revolution even. The Industrial Revolution was a cover-up. The Industrial Revolution was put there to convey to us the concept of where we built this great civilization that we've got now, which isn't a great civilization at all. It's a prefab thrown together monstrosity that has been thrown together and slapped in place on the bones of the civilization that exists underneath it. And the reason it's been thrown together and is so slapped together is because it's been done so haphazardly and so hurriedly, because they needed to cover up the fact that this civilization is there. And this is all portrayed by the historical event that is portrayed as the Industrial Revolution. Even the term Industrial Revolution, it sounds so impressive, and it creates this thing in your mind, this time when we all figured out how things work, when we got machinery and everyone started inventing things, and it led to this situation where building up from the mud of all of this stuff that everyone's slapping together and throwing together this huge city. Wow, look at what we've got. It creates the whole concept of how this happened, and it allowed them to slap all this together so haphazardly and so hurriedly. Just a subtle NLP, even in the term Industrial Revolution. And what this concept did was it created the timeline needed to make us think that this Industrial Revolution brought us to this point. But all the technology existed before then. The whole thing has been a scam. It's all been to lead us away from what we really are. Because a lot of the stuff that we are told existed in ancient history wasn't so ancient at all. It was actually quite recent. As I said a few shows ago, one of the things that first struck me when I first went to Peru and saw the walls at Sacsayhuaman was how fresh they looked. And I took a friend there recently, actually, and she also noticed just how fresh all the stonework looked on these walls. You could see that they must have been made from some form of softened stone, and you could see just how new all this stonework was. And this type of stonework, polygonal stonework, exists on every single continent that there is on Earth. It's everywhere. It's even here in Australia, down in Gosford, there's polygonal stonework there in walls where there's ancient Egyptian glyphs. People try to say these are hoaxes and all sorts of things, but they're not. They're real glyphs. They're from an ancient Egyptian text. Actually, if you were going to fake these glyphs, you would probably use known Egyptian characters. And the characters that they've used aren't characters that you'll find in normal books on Egyptology. These are older than those characters. So whoever supposedly forged these glyphs had a very, very good understanding of ancient Egyptian. So that would indicate that they're not forged at all. They're actually real glyphs. And there was a culture that existed, and it was a worldwide culture. This is why people have had so much trouble locating Atlantis, and why so many different people have claimed that they found Atlantis in so many different locations. Because, yeah, sure, there may have been an island that sank. There may have been a landmass loss. And there's every indication that there was, folks. There's records of this in almost all cultures on Earth. They talk about white-skinned, light-skinned, very tall people who came from a continent that sank. Very notably in South American legends, the nation is referred to as Aztlan. There was even a stele that existed, a Mayan stele, which depicted this sinking of this continent and people arriving in boats to South America. This stele used to be held in the German museum, but naturally it was bombed to oblivion in World War II, so we can't get at it anymore. But there is every indication from all legends, from all cultures, that this civilization did exist. What is important to understand is that what we refer to as the Atlantean culture was a real culture, and it existed as a worldwide culture that influenced every single nation on this earth, every single people on this earth, and it was a worldwide culture. You know, polygonal architecture is very, very peculiar. We can't do it today. This particular way of locking stones together, creating walls of interlocking monolithic stones that we can't even move, let alone shape in a manner that they will all fit together in such a way. Makes them earthquake-proof. It's an incredible style of building. And the fact that it exists on all continents, this is not a coincidence, folks. This is not something that people would just come up with. And there are pyramids found on all continents as well. There's pyramids here in Australia in a place called Gympie. There's pyramids that are all over China. There's more pyramids in China than just about the whole rest of the world combined. There's pyramids all through the Americas. There's the remains of pyramid structures through Europe. There's traces of this culture that can be found everywhere. And as I said, was a worldwide culture that existed not too long ago, probably up to as recently as 200 or 300 years ago. Well, at least the last remnants of it were probably chased out of existence 200 or 300 years ago. There appears to have been a huge attempt to basically scour the world and wipe out all trace of this ancient culture and wipe out all trace of anybody who still held the ancient knowledge of how to do the things we used to do. Those who knew how to build these megalithic structures, those who knew how to build all of this stuff that we've got lying around the world, those who knew that type of technology were all chased out of existence, and we were moved away from what we were, which was a peaceful world. We lived in a world where all religions lived in peace with each other. We lived in a world where all nations lived in peace with each other. And then a few hundred years ago, this psychopathic, parasitic government system that we've got now superimposed itself over our reality and went out of its way to decimate everybody's memory of who and what they were, everybody's culture, everybody's history. They changed the whole thing. And since that time, they've fed us a complete crock of rubbish. They've told us lies about absolutely every single thing that they can. They've lied to us about reality. They've lied to us about every single aspect of reality. They've lied to us in our science about what reality is even made of what we're made of what we are. Every single thing you can think of, they've lied to us about. And most especially, they've gone out of their way to decimate people's culture and decimate people's memory. Because if you can disconnect the people from their history and from their culture, then you disconnect them from what they are. And this has been an ongoing process. They're still doing it now in Africa, folks. This is what all these wars and battles are about in Africa, because there's still areas of Africa where people are still connected to the earth. People still hold ancient traditions. They still hold ancient knowledge. And they want to get rid of everybody's ancient traditions. They don't want anybody to have their real history. They want to superimpose their own history over the people, because that disconnects them from who and what they are. That's what it's all about, folks. That's what the entire process is about. That's what all of this decimation of history, all this decimation of historical artifacts all through the Middle East, all through Europe and all through Africa is all about. Because all of it just further disconnects us from who we are. And they've lied to us on quite literally every single level that you can think of, folks. And again, it's stuff that we just take for granted and never question.